Well, Razorback fans, Taylen Green is the quarterback. Bobby Petrino is the offensive coordinator. We've talked about it enough, but what's a reasonable expectation for Taylen this year? Well, let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend as we're 10 days away. It's throwing me off, man, having a Thursday game. I'm loving the fact that it's a Thursday game to start the season, but it's still like when I see everybody else's countdown from other college football landscapes, it just kind of throws me off sometimes. But still, 10 days, which we'll talk about just like we have been in our previous podcasts and everything. But I wanted to talk about Taylen Green today, and some of you probably are either like we're getting to the point. Let's just be honest about this. Let's just be very clear. We're all getting to the point of fall camp and preseason where we're like, we don't care. Shut up. We just want to see games. We're tired of talking about the same stuff. We're tired of asking the same questions. We're tired of all this. Let's just get the season going. And I agree. Like, I've always felt like once you get to single digits, like once you get to single digit days away from the season, it really hits home. So that's what a lot of you are probably feeling. But, you know, over the weekend, I've done somewhat of research because I'm putting together some compilation videos and things for Inside Arkansas, which video editing, man, I see why people charge so much for it. But I did a lot of research and just into some random things, you know, historically purposed stats and numbers and things from Arkansas and from the Razorbacks and everything. And when I was going back and looking at some of the years and some of the production that Razorback quarterbacks had, specifically under Bobby Petrino, it kind of made me start thinking about Taylen Green. Like we keep referencing, or at least I keep referencing, Petrino back during that time frame, back during the time of when he was the head coach of Arkansas and the quarterback play that he had, because he only had really 3 starting quarterbacks. I know maybe some other people started because of injuries or whatever, but when you're talking about those years, there was really just 3. It started with Casey Dick, then he had Ryan Mallett, then he had Tyler Wilson. That's how it went. And those years, I just looked at the numbers of what those quarterbacks did in those particular seasons. And when I started looking at those numbers, I'm like, okay, so like surely we can't sit here and expect Taylen Green to have something similar to these numbers, right? Or can we? And if we do, does that mean we need to kind of let that expectation, assuming that he stays healthy the whole season, let that expectation actually come to fruition? Well, let's just go through it, all right? Because I want to ask this in context of where you think and where we all think Taylen Green can end up in this one season at Arkansas, one season with Bobby Petrino. We know what the offensive skill position looks like. We know what the offensive line, or at least we have an idea of what the offensive line is going to look like. He's a different type of quarterback than what we've seen, especially the ones that were at Arkansas. So we got to keep that into consideration. But what are reasonable expectations? Well, Casey Dick back in 2008, he started the majority of the year. I know Nathan Dick, his brother, actually played some that year too. Even freshman Tyler Wilson got in some run. But that year, Casey Dick threw 57% completion percentage, had 13 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, threw for 25, almost 2,600 yards. Now, the touchdown-interception ratio was not good. However, at that time, throwing for almost 2,600 yards, folks, Arkansas had not had a quarterback that even sniffed that type of number since Clint Sterner threw for 2,600 yards in 98. And then before that, never had that many yards. So you're talking about up until that point, up in 2008, Casey Dick had the second most passing yards in a season. So you got to take that into consideration. But either way, that was first season with Petrino, with Casey Dick. And then Ryan Mallett comes in. And obviously the numbers change. Ryan Mallett in 2009. Now his completion percentage was only 56%. When I say only, it's just because you get so used to seeing some big numbers. But get this, he had 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and threw for 3,624 yards. In 2010, which was his best season, he had upped his completion percentage by a full 10%, essentially. He threw 65% completion percentage for 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, did have 5 more picks, but 3,869 yards. Ryan Mallett in the SEC, prime 2010 SEC, had nearly 4,000 passing yards. We're talking about when Arkansas was going up against Steve Spurrier, South Carolina every year, going up against Nick Saban in Alabama, going up against Les Miles and LSU when they were hitting their stride. You also had that year with Auburn and Cam Newton there. You had really good teams that Arkansas had to face off against. And he threw for almost 4,000 yards. Tyler Wilson, the next year, comes in, completes 63% of his passes, 24 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions for 3,638 yards. So it's kind of crazy. Tyler Wilson actually threw more passes than what Tyler Wilson did, or completed more passes than what Ryan Mallett did. But, you know, there's a lot of elements for that. But either way, those are the numbers for the quarterbacks when Bobby Petrino was at Arkansas and just kind of laid out there. Now, you can go over to the Louisville side of things because he did go to Louisville, and he did have some other quarterback, like Lamar Jackson, of course, was the guy that everyone knew what he was. So he was a Heisman Trophy winner. I hear he was pretty good. So here's what Lamar Jackson did in his, he played a lot his freshman year, but actually he played in every game his freshman year and had 1,800 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 8 picks, completing 54% of his passes. So in 2016, he upped it to where he started every game. He completed 56% of his passes. Still not great, but did it for 3,543 yards, 30 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. On top of that, he also rushed for 1,571 yards and 21 touchdowns. Okay, so for you doing your math out there, 30 touchdown passes, 21 rushing touchdowns, that totals 51 freaking touchdowns from Lamar Jackson. And that was his second year. That wasn't even the year that he won the Heisman. In 2017, the year he won the Heisman, his completion percentage busted up to 59%. He threw for 3,660 yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and then rushed for 1,601 yards for 18 touchdowns. So if you look at it statistically, other than his completion percentage and about 100 more yards, his second year under Petrino was actually better in his third when he ended up winning the Heisman. So what does all that mean? What are you talking about, John? Why are you reading us numbers? I'm reading all those off because those are essentially the quarterbacks that Arkansas or in Louisville had when Bobby Petrino was the head coach, or at least the quarterback coach at those respective places. And they were also Power 5 teams. I'm not going to call and classify last year's Texas A&M because Connor Wigman got hurt, and it's really hard to know what the numbers are when their starting quarterback got hurt midway in the season. So Taylen Green's the guy. And we're going to, of course, assume and hope and pray that he stays healthy this season. So what can he do, comparatively speaking, to those stats that we just threw out there? Are we expecting him to go out and have a Lamar Jackson type of year where he throws and rushes for 50 touchdowns, has 3,500 passing yards and everything? Would be nice. It'd be really nice. In fact, it'd be pretty dadgum cool if he did that. But I feel like that's probably a little bit of an unreasonable expectation. Okay, so just cross out the Lamar Jackson deal. Well, what about the quarterbacks at Arkansas? And we're talking about passing now, more so than anything, even though, again, different quarterbacks. But passing-wise, is it reasonable to expect him to throw for almost 4,000 yards like Ryan Mallett did and 30 touchdowns? Still a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. Well, what about Tyler Wilson? Well, he threw for 24 touchdowns, but still 3,600 yards. Do you expect him to do that? Don't know. So this is my main point I'm bringing up. You can't really compare, and you can't really look at all these other quarterbacks and say, okay, well, based on this logic, and with the Petrino being the coordinator and everything, this is what a reasonable expectation is numbers-wise. Because Taylen Green's a different quarterback than all those guys. And I also think it's unfair to sit here and say that Taylen Green is going to have the same or relatively the same or even better numbers than what Ryan Mallett, Tyler Wilson, or Lamar Jackson had under Petrino. I'm not expecting him to get to those numbers at all. Just being honest. But what he honestly needs to do, and a reasonable expectation to where Arkansas can actually be really successful doing it this way, what he needs to do is limit mistakes and make the right decision when it comes to the running or the passing side of his game. If he does those two things, I think the rest of it's going to take care of itself. I mean, if you wanted to put numbers on it, I think, hey, throwing for 2,500 yards, running for almost 1,000 yards, having a total combined of, something like 25, 30 touchdowns with running and passing, something like that. If you want numbers, I feel like that would be pretty successful. But to me, the biggest difference and the biggest change and one of the biggest moments that you're going to have is you're going to have a quarterback that limits the mistakes. Taylen Green threw a lot of picks when he was at Boise State. His completion percentage wasn't great. We all know that. So why does anyone feel confident in him? Why are we excited about? Why am I excited about? Why are you excited about? Why? Just looking at the numbers and being at Boise State, why would anybody be excited or confident or feeling good about Taylen Green? Well, it's because it's Bobby Petrino. That's the quarterback he wanted. That's the quarterback he's had. And that's the quarterback they're going to be riding with this year. Time will tell. But I expect some really good things out of Taylen Green this year. I really do. We'll talk a little bit about the practice and a little bit of a change nowadays, or at least moving forward into the season here in just a second. But folks, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, but we'll tell you more here on the other side of the break, so stay with us. All right, folks, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel, all right? You heard us talk a lot about it. It's America's number one sportsbook, right? Well, we have a little something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season and Sunday afternoon game, out-of-market games, all of that good stuff. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's number one sportsbook. It's FanDuel.com, the greatest of all sports betting books. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So, we've had a chance to hear from coaches, and we'll have some chances to hear from coaches this week. Petrino will meet with the media again, which I think is always fascinating, as well as Travis Williams. Sam Pittman will meet, and then, you kind of go into game week. But either way, the practices are officially closed. The scrimmages or whatever, the very limited amount that the media even got to watch is done. There will be nothing that you can see or know about unless the coaches tell you or whoever's meeting with the media that day from here on out until the season starts. So let me ask you. How do you feel? How do you feel right now? How do you feel about the team? Do you feel the exact same that you did, before fall camp? Do you feel the exact same way that you did in the spring? Has anything changed for you at all? That's my question. Has anything changed? We all get excited about college football season, right? I mean, we say, we're not going to be any good. We suck. This is the least excited anyone's ever been, blah, blah, blah. But when we get closer, we start feeling it a little bit. We start seeing and hearing things. You're listening to this podcast. You're like, John, you're a moron. I mean, we all do those things. So we do have an element of excitement. But I'm not talking about the excitement. I'm talking about your feeling about this team. I've always looked back upon my changing of the narrative or my changing of feelings when it comes to confidence level of this team, of any team, really. And so for Arkansas, in the spring, before spring ball even started, I don't really know how great I felt about everything. I really don't. I was excited about Petrino. I was excited about the potential of some of the guys, But I didn't really know even the ones that I was excited about and what they looked like. I didn't know much about Jaquindon Jackson that they came from Utah. I didn't know much about the offensive line other than where they came from. So I didn't really have any good feelings about anything, to be honest. I mean, coming off a 4-8 season, nobody's really talking about you. You didn't really have any major splashes in the transfer portal that got everyone talking. Your recruiting class wasn't there. No, again, no one gives a rip. No one cares. No one cares. But then spring goes through and you start to feel a little bit more because you're starting to see, okay, this Jaquindon Jackson guy is actually pretty legit. And, we thought maybe Jacoby Criswell or somebody else would have a chance at quarterback, but no, this Taylen Green guy is the guy. Man, he's apparently what Petrino has always wanted. And these wide receivers, they all came back and they're looking healthy and they're getting faster. Showed out a little bit in the spring. No, but the defense, the linebackers, I don't know any of these guys. Who are these guys? I don't know their names. There was just some uncertainty about it. The spring game, I know, is something everybody had watched, and Taylen Green looked really good in it, I think, all things considered. There's some other highlights there, but it's a spring game. It's a practice. How do you feel? Okay, go through summertime. It's all really silent. It's quiet. Nothing really going on. Nothing really anybody's majorly caring about. And then when fall camp gets up, you start hearing from people who go to practice, man, this guy's looking really good. Or, man, this unit is really improved. Or then you got the coaches coming to press conference. I love this kid. This kid's been doing great. This kid's been doing awesome. This kid's going to play. This kid, you better watch out for him now. It just becomes into either a lot of talk from the coaches or a lot of talk from the media. And it's not a bad thing. It's just because it's what we got. It's what we got. When we see things in practice for 20 minutes, it's all right, well, this is what we saw. Doesn't mean that it's immediately and perfectly going to equate to the regular season, but that's what you saw. And then the only thing else we can do is be going with whatever the coaches tell us. So does it really change your mind? It doesn't mine, at least. But I looked through all the motions and stuff, folks, and I think this might be one of the few years, and I'm being honest about this. This is one of the few years I feel like from the beginning of spring, heading into the final few days here at fall camp, I haven't changed my mind on the feelings and confidence of this team. I still feel like they're going to be better than what they were a year ago, but not massively improved. I expect 6-6, maybe 7-5 if things really go well. That's how I felt in the beginning, and that's how I'm continuing to feel now. So maybe I'm alone in that, and that's fine. But it always just is fascinating and pretty funny to me when fans kind of take, different approaches on how they look at, players or quarterbacks and who they get excited about and who they don't and what they start predicting and everything. Listen, I think Arkansas is going to be better this year, plain and simple. But how much better? Man, I hope it's a lot. I hope it is, but 10 days away, right? Which we'll talk about. Actually, I guess it's 10 days from, it's 10 days. I always get nervous about my math. 10 days. Don't worry, I went to college for 7.5 years. We'll talk about that here in a second, so stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, here on Locked On Razorbacks, we got to tell you about passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether it's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning money or you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home those huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. 10 days, we've had some fun with that last week. And, people may disagree. as I've noticed from some of the replies and comments, people have been pretty upset. They're like, oh, you don't know this number of something? You didn't mention this guy? Yeah, I didn't. But here's the thing. It's like number 10, I don't think there's a more popular number in Razorback baseball that really isn't that popular in Razorback football. At least, no, I don't think of it. The only two players that just immediately pop into my head for being number 10 is Brandon Allen and Bumper Pool. Like, those are the only ones. Maybe I'm missing somebody. Maybe I should be thinking of somebody else. Like maybe Gary Brashears back in the day, I think was number 10. But as far as notables, those are the only ones. So, thinking about it from, we'll start with Bumper Pool. Bumper Pool was a highly regarded player coming out of high school. Family was Razorback fans. He was a Razorback fan. He came into Arkansas, first off, with the greatest name ever. And second off, like into the Chad Morris era. And that was, we all know how that went. But he stuck with it. He stayed with Arkansas. He battled injuries a lot of times, but he came out all right. He came out in good shape. Ended up being just a really solid linebacker for Arkansas, and especially, in his final year at Arkansas, there in 2021, I think everybody could safe to say, at least that season, it was about as good as you could ask for that linebacker core. As crazy as it was, man, think about it. Bumper Pool, Hayden Henry, and Grant Morgan were really solid SEC linebackers. No one would have guessed that, considering two of them were walk-ons, but they got it going. So that's kind of what I remember him. But Brandon Allen's the one I'll always remember, because not only is he a Fayetteville Bulldog, I always got to give a shout out to the Fayetteville Purple Dogs, but you talk about a pretty crazy season, or at least a career that he had at Arkansas. He comes in as a highly regarded high school quarterback. He's a 4-star. And I remember there was another quarterback by the name of Kyle Frazier who was coming out of the state of Arkansas in that same class. Or, no, I guess it wasn't the same class. A couple years prior. But either way. But they thought that, he was really going to be the better quarterback than Brandon Allen. Kyle Frazier obviously did not. But Brandon Allen's first year was basically, at least his first moment. Hey, John L. Smith's the head coach. All things are going south. And the Missouri, you just lost to Louisiana Monroe in Little Rock. So we're going to reward you by starting against the number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide at home. Oh, okay. So that didn't go well for him. And so went through all of that. And then Bielema comes in, and he has Jim Chaney as his offense coordinator, which Jim Chaney, they had a good running attack there, but boy, that was not very good for his development. Brandon Allen's, that is. He had some decent moments. He got hurt on a couple occasions. 2013, he was hurt the majority of the season. 2014, he got hurt towards the end of the season. But 2015, when they hired Dan Enos, which is amazing thinking about that now, but when they changed it up and had Dan Enos come in, Brandon Allen had an incredible season, folks. People may forget just how good that 2015 year was for not only Arkansas, but for Brandon Allen. He threw 3,440 yards, completed 66% of his passes for 30 touchdowns and only 8 picks. That's pretty incredible. And what was crazy about that year, too, is he had lost, I guess he didn't. I know he lost Keon Hatcher for a long period. I think pretty much the whole season there, who's the number 1 wide receiver for Arkansas. He lost him. Jared Cornelius, I think, broke his arm in the middle of that year. So that wasn't very helpful. So he had Dominic Reed, Drew Morgan, and Hunter Henry. People remember the big wide receivers for Arkansas under Bobby Petrino, which they should. They were incredible. They were the best ever. But the fact that Brandon Allen was able to do that, and I'm not dispelling what those wide receivers were. I'm just saying, they dealt with injury, and they were still able to put together a really incredible offensive game. And I'll kind of end on this note, and I don't want to really bring up bad things, because Brandon Allen did a lot of things. But Brandon Allen still was a part of one of the greatest performances that I have ever seen in a single game. And I don't know if it'll ever be done again at Arkansas, at least. But he still lost, thanks to some coaching decisions. But Brandon Allen against Mississippi State in 2015, folks, he threw 7 touchdown passes. You remember that? He threw 7 touchdown passes in a single game, 0 picks. Him and Dak Prescott were dueling. And Brandon Allen threw 7 touchdown passes. And I still, to this day, will always bring it up because it still just irks me. Brandon Allen has to be the only quarterback, in fact, he is, who threw 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, in a regular, timed game. Didn't go to overtime or anything, just a regular game, and lost. Imagine if I bring that up to you this year, folks. We'll make it Taylen Green. Imagine if I tell you, hey guys, Taylen Green's going to throw in one game this year, 7 touchdowns and 0 picks in that game. Do you think you'll probably win? Will that be your first thing? And be like, okay, well, that's a win. I would hope so. Didn't happen. Did not happen. Regulation. That's what we're talking about. Regulation. Did not happen. Ugh. Either way. Shout out to Brandon Allen. Shout out to Bumper Pool. And shout out to all the other number 10s out there. Appreciate everybody listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have, and we'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.